Welcome ladies and gentlemen, my name's Chronicles here on this Destiny 2 video, and today we're going to be taking a look at my top 10 favorite hunter exotics in Destiny 2. And of course, as always, a completely subjective list based on my own opinion, my own play styles, what exotics that I like. Obviously you're going to have some differences of what kind of things you like. And of course, the PvP gameplay you'll see in the background was captured by my buddy Zoomzy, link to his Twitch in the description down below. And of course, as always, I've made a spreadsheet for this top 10, and as always, you can find it on my Discord server, fully public for you guys to use in the channel #SpreadsheetStocks, where you can find all of my spreadsheets and all of my documents. And if you did not know, spreadsheets and documents wouldn't be possible without my support from patrons on Patreon. Because the fact is, I don't make any money from these spreadsheets. They're just a really good tool and resource that I want to offer to you guys, because I would love to see these in other games. So if you'd like to see these spreadsheets and documents continue, please consider checking out my Patreon, again in the description down below. Moving on to the main section of the video, let's take a deep dive into the spreadsheet. If you've never seen my spreadsheets before, this is what they look like. Dark theme, pictures, rankings, a lot of information that you'd ever want to know about these exotics, as well as my full rankings for PvE and PvP of all these different exotics for a bunch of different classes. I've done all of them but the Warlock this season. This is obviously the one from Arrivals, but you can obviously take a look at all the spreadsheets that I do. Now obviously I don't do my top 10s like a lot of other people do. I'm not going to hang the top 10 on a carrot on a stick going through each one individually. If you want to know what my favorite are, you can just go to the spreadsheet, or you can see on screen right now. But the reasons why certain things are ranked or unranked the way they are is going to be very important. For example, the 6 Coyote, even though it's ranked at number 9, is an exotic that I would use in the highest level activities. Even in solo, flawless, prophecy, or dungeon runs, 6 Coyote is a more favorable option. So the reasons why you use a certain exotic is going to be very important. And sometimes you'll even have a use for things that are unranked. Moving on, I wanted to talk about all of the non-ranked items first, talking about them very briefly, why they weren't in the top 10 and why they're not highly rated, why they're not being used that often. And again, this is going to have to be quite brief, as I cannot go through each one of these in detail, otherwise this video would be like 4 hours long. So if you had a question about a specific exotic, let me know in the comments down below. First up, we have the Assassin's Cowl, which gives you health regeneration and invisibility from either your charged melees from the subclass or your finishers. The big issue with this is that usually getting a melee kill is quite dangerous, cannot be used in the high level play, and usually if you're getting a finisher, it's at the end of the fight against a higher level target, at which point you don't really need the invisibility. The Foe Tracer, allowing you to see enemies through walls with the stinger hit marker, similar to the One-Eyed Mask, but it's one of those things that activates whenever you're looking at an enemy, whereas the One-Eyed Mask potentially showed you an enemy that you didn't know about. Either way, I definitely think it's a good exotic, very close to being in the top 10 for PvP. As far as the dealing more damage, low health enemy counts as an enemy below 20% health, so that really doesn't do anything for you. The Graviton Forfeit, allowing you to have a longer invisibility effect from whatever invisibility effect you have, including the dodge, the smoke bomb, Rat King, anything that makes you invisible, and you get a faster melee charge, allowing you to use the Pathfinder smoke bomb to go invisible more often while you're invisible, which is really nice. However, I think the 6 Coyote combo is probably better at doing what this does. I'll talk about that later on. The Knucklehead Radar, allowing you to see your radar while you're aiming down sights, similar to the Ace of Spades or the Might of Multi-tool, but you can use it on any weapon from any of your slots, which is really nice to have and often lets you have the first shot in a lot of engagement. The Aeon Swift, a pretty bad exotic that gives you a very small bonus to your teammates' abilities. It is activated on dodge, which makes it one of the better Aeons, but it's one of those exotics that nobody uses, so nobody uses. Khepri's Sting, allowing you to get true sight while in your smoke bomb effect, either from that special melee combo that you can see on the exotic's perk or from any of your smoke bomb effects. And if you don't know, true sight is basically wall hacks. You can see the full red silhouette of an enemy exactly where they are across the entire map. And I believe it's actually banned in tournaments because if you have a sniper and you have true sight, you basically win that engagement. However, it is one of those high skill floor, high skill ceiling kind of exotics. The Liar's Handshake, which is the melee based exotic for the hunter, allowing you to get some pretty high melee damage and heal yourself while using any of your arc melee attacks. However, obviously it is based on melee and there's no way to get a broken set of damage anymore, so it's just one of those fun ones you can't really use in the high level. Mechanier's Trick Sleeve, a number of bonuses to your sidearms. However, sidearms don't really need better ready speed or reload speed, they're pretty good, and the bonus to weapon damage is after swapping while critically wounded is too requirement. The Oath Keepers, allowing you to hold your bow charges indefinitely. The biggest use is going to be with the Monarch, allowing you to hold that poison for a longer period of time. but I don't really like using exotic primaries in PvE, and in PvP, usually people just walk away. And just in general, I can get used to the bow. I don't really need Oathkeepers. Sealed Humkar Grasp, allowing you to instantly reload on melee damage rather than melee kills with Grave Robber. However, it is based on melee, and I usually can just reload my weapon with one of the armor mods, so I don't really need this. Shards of Galanor, an exotic that used to be in my top 10, nay, actually used to be at number 3 back in Forsaken and multiple seasons following that. Now, what has happened since then? First of all, a number of nerfs to Blade Barrage in general, a number of nerfs to Shards of Galanor, allowing this exotic to not hit the crazy levels that it used to. On top of the fact that the Way of 1,000 Cuts subclass is really not that good in the neutral game, it is all revolving around that super, which admittedly is good, but usually doesn't change the number of kills you get by much in PvP, and there are better options for boss damage and ad slang and support than Blade Barrage. It's one of those middling things that nobody really wants to use anymore. But it's not bad, it's just I don't want to use it over other things. Shinobu's Vow, you get an extra skip grenade, improved skip grenades, which gives it more twiddly bits, and you get more skip grenades from skip grenade damage. In my opinion, a very well-based exotic that rewards people from using the exotic well, but arc subclasses are really not that useful these days in either PvP or PvE. Definitely Stasis taking over has pushed a lot of subclasses down. Young Humkar's Spine, giving a number of bonuses to your Trip Mine grenade, increasing the regeneration speed, the blast radius, and the duration. Trip Mine is good, and I think that Solar is becoming even better since Shatter Dive got nerfed, but just not enough to really make me put it in the top 10. Gwynson Vest, increasing the length of your Spectral Blade super, which used to be a crazy powerful super. Nowadays, it gets shut down by a lot of stasis stuff. Just a Warlock melee can just completely stop this subclass in its tracks. Lucky Raspberry, a number of bonuses to your Arc Bolt grenade, which is a good PvP grenade, and a chance to instantly recharge it, which is always nice to have, but again, Arc subclasses are really not that strong these days. The Ophidia's Spathe, an exotic that gives you an extra melee charge just for your Solar subclass. The Solar subclass, you don't really need an extra melee charge. It's really not that beneficial, even with Solar Plexus. The Frosties, giving you a very tiny amount of ability regeneration that's very much not noticeable whatsoever, and a faster sprint speed. Just not really worth much. Gemini Jester, an exotic that allows your dodges to disorient enemies in a pretty large radius and temporarily moves their radar. In PvP, it's basically a flashbang effect on your screen and you lose your radar that's activated by your dodge, meaning you can do it pretty often. However, in PvP, usually just forces your enemies to sit in a corner and camp, and that's not really how you want your enemies to fight. Lucky Pants, giving you a number of bonuses to your hand cannons, very similar to having dexterity or opening shot for your hand cannon, but usually you can just have dexterity, quick draw, or opening shot. It's not something that's that needed unless you really need it. And finally, the Bombardiers, giving you basically a martyrdom on your dodge, but usually people can just walk away from the explosions and it doesn't even one-shot enemies. So it's not really something that you can really depend on and usually costs you your life. Right, so with the unranked items out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with the top 10. Starting at number 10, we have the Aether's Embrace. First and foremost, may I just mention that it's S' in the name, and that kind of bothers me, but I guess that's not the point. If you've never heard of it before, the weighted knife gets a second bounce, which if you did not know, the weighted knife is part of Way of the Sharpshooter and only part of Way of the Sharpshooter, and rapid precision hits with your weapon grants the weighted knife a significant damage bonus. In PvP, this is double damage, in PvE, this is triple damage. And it gives it the ability to stagger unstoppable unshielded combatants for a short period of time. From my experience, it only seems to be the unstoppable champion, so this is basically an unstoppable punch exotic, which we've had that in artifacts in the past that we've never wanted to use. Now, one of the biggest benefits of this exotics that seems to be a hidden perk on it is that it increases the aim assistance of your knives. It doesn't say that it does that, but from what I've seen on research and on the internet, a lot of people are talking about how it does technically seem to course correct more with this exotic. And this could be hearsay, but from what they've shown, it does seem to course correct more with this exotic. So if you like your throwing knives, this exotic is going to be very useful. And on top of that, the bonus for extra damage is very easy to get and lasts a long time. You get 5 headshots with your weapon, and you have 30 seconds of this extra damage, which again can one-shot body shot, and with the enemy being a super, you can one-shot headshot them, which is pretty strong. Combine this with something like Gambler's Dodge and a high mobility, you can get your melee pretty frequently, especially if you're getting headshots, you instantly get it back, which is very nice to have. Moving on to number 9 in this top 10 countdown, we have the 6 Coyote. An exotic that I used to have zero respect for has definitely climbed up my ranking, so far even that I used it during my solo Flawless Prophecy, and I really could not do it without it. Now, it used to be back in the day that I had no respect for any exotic that said an additional charge of whatever, but more recently I'm starting to realize that overflow charging means you can use that charge a lot more frequently, because the fact is you're probably not going to be using the charge of whatever, in this example it's going to be your dodge, as soon as you get it, allowing you to charge that second one in that interim amount of time, which usually allows you to use your dodge or whatever charge you're using a lot more frequently. In this case, the 6 Coyote is best paired up with the Way of the Pathfinder, allowing you to use that smoke bomb to make yourself invisible, and then using Gambler's Dodge to dodge near an enemy and get your melee back. Obviously, dodge charges in around like 9 seconds, and your melee charges in maybe like 30 to 40 seconds, allowing you to get your invisibility nearly 100% of the time, and 6 Coyote enables you to have that a lot more consistently. And I realize that a lot of people would probably put the 6 Coyote a lot higher on their list, definitely one of those top tier exotics you can use in solo, and even probably in Grandmaster Nightfalls. However, I would say that it is kind of carried by the subclass. Technically, an additional dodge charge is really good, but in my opinion, still worth a 7.5 out of 10 in PvE. The rest of it is carried by the subclass. So definitely an exotic that I think is a lot more used than its ranking. Very similar to the Helmless Saint 14, which is carried by the bubble and not the exotic itself. Moving on to number 8 in this top 10 countdown, we have the Dragon Shadow. If you've never heard of it, dodging reloads all of your weapons and increases both your movement and weapon handling speed, and even though it doesn't say it, also increases your reload speed for a brief period of time. Now, if you have maximum mobility, you can have this effect up nearly 100% of the time. Technically, there was a slight nerf to how often you can dodge with the opening of Beyond Light, but this exotic can still be used to have nearly 100% uptime. Now, there are a lot of things that make this incredible in PvP. First of all, moving very quickly, just normally, moving quickly while sprinting, moving quickly in general is very strong. You also swap weapons insanely fast, even faster than a high handling quick draw weapon, which allows you to have a pretty significant advantage in a lot of different ways. And on top of that is also universal, meaning that it can be used with the Stasis subclass. And I love the way that Bungie describes this as the ninja exotic, because you really do move incredibly quickly. Moving on to number 7 in this top 10 countdown, we have the Raiju's Harness, an exotic that I feel is just generally underrated, on top of the fact is especially effective against stasis, which is extremely prevalent. If you've never heard of it before, the Whirlwind Guard Super, which is the Wave the Current Middle Tree Arc subclass super, guarding consumes less energy, and you can press it again to deactivate the Whirlwind Guard and get some super energy back. Very similar to how Chaos Reach works, allowing you to get supers more often in a match without wasting it at the end of your super. Now, if you've never used this Whirlwind Guard before, it reflects nearly everything, including enemy gunfire, explosions, Nova bombs, golden gunshots, and including all of the stasis projectiles, including the Hunter's Stasis Tornado. Let me tell you, you have not had a great time in Destiny 2 until you've reflected an enemy tornado and turned it to your team. That's right, you can make the tornado switch teams, which obviously makes no sense, but it's hilarious. And this is especially poignant considering these Sentinel shields cannot block anything stasis. This thing can and reflects it. Moving on to number 6 in this top 10 countdown, we have the Raiden Flux, an exotic that has been dominating the top 10 and the top 5 since the game came out. Although technically it has received a nerf where they put a lot of the power of this exotic just natively in the Arc Staff, overall, this exotic does improve the Arc Staff by the same amount. Its main perk, which technically is a little misleading, I'll fill in the gaps, quick successive light attack hits with the Arc Staff increases the damage output and duration. From my experience, you can get out 26 light attacks if you're hitting a boss the entire time. And yes, it has to be hits and not just light attacks. However, the best use of this is going to be against ad slaying. So if you see a lot of ads in the area, which this technically is an AoE attack, you're going to kill a lot of ads for a very long time, and it is a very resistant super. If you use this in combination with Way of the Wind, your dodge can technically give you more resistance, meaning you can use it in the higher level in Master and even Grandmaster Nightfalls, although Grandmaster's is a little bit shaky. And then obviously the one downside to this is that the Arc Staff and just generally the Arc Strider is not the strongest, probably one of the weakest subclasses for the Hunters. Up next at number 5, we have the Wormhusk Crown, one of the best universal PvP exotics in the game, allowing you to get health and shields just by using your dodge, allowing you to re-engage with more health or retreat safely, and just in general being able to get health and shields back every 9 seconds is really strong in both PvE and PvP. Definitely something I think that a lot of people underrate in PvE, especially in higher level things like raids or Master and Grandmaster Nightfalls. people must realize that staying alive is oftentimes more important than getting a very slight boost for your super. So if you find that you die a lot in raids, or you find that you die a lot in certain activities that you shouldn't be relative to other people around you, Wormhusk Crown will definitely be a great option. In my personal opinion, if you're more of a defensive player in PvP, this is going to be a better option than Stompies. Moving on to number 4 in this top 10 countdown, we have the Orpheus Rig. Yet again, another exotic that has been dominating since the game came out, allowing you to have a lot more supers, having a lot more damage, and just in general making this support subclass for Wave the Trapper and Pathfinder a lot more effective. I even literally used it for Grandmaster Nightfall yesterday that you can see on screen right now. Its main perk specifically provides ability energy for each enemy tethered by deadfall anchors. Deadfall anchors being the Wave the Trapper big tether, and ability energy including grenade, melee, dodge, and your super energy up to 50% for the super energy. And the last part is Mobius Quiver has more shots. Mobius Quiver being the multi-shot bow part of Wave the Pathfinder, which technically Mobius Quiver actually has pretty good DPS on top of the fact that any tether weakens enemy targets, making them take more damage, and makes enemies share damage up to 50% to all the enemies nearby, which is another nerf that this exotic got, or this subclass got. And even then, through all of that, this exotic is still very powerful, and I use it in Grandmaster Nightfalls all the time. I use it in raids, I use it for fun, and I use it for incredible utility. You spawn tons of orbs for all the enemies you tether, you're able to kill large groups of enemies with a shared damage, and weakening targets, even just shooting at one big boy target champion, is still very effective and very useful. However, obviously in PvP, not that great. Coming up at number 3 in this top 10 countdown, we have the Mask of Bakris, a new exotic that has been ripping it up in PvP and even has some pretty good applications in PvE as well. If you've never heard of it before, it replaces your stasis subclass dodge ability with a longer range, faster moving shift that partially cloaks you. Let me translate this for you. It teleports you from point A to point B a farther distance. And if you're using this stasis subclass and you have both aspects, it creates a freezing effect at the start and end of your dodge. After shifting, your arc weapons deal increased damage to combatants for a short time, and if you didn't know, combatants means PvE, so it's 10% more damage with your arc weapons in PvE, and you deal increased damage to all slowed and encased combatants. I would say the one big downside to this exotic is that while having that extra damage, the light shift buff, your dodge cannot recharge, so you have to wait around 20 seconds to get your dodge back instead of like 9 seconds. However, the ability to teleport with your dodge is unmatched. The fact is, any damage headed towards you, you can completely escape from for the duration of that shift. So you see an enemy rocket coming in, you see a big grenade, you see a dome grenade, you see an enemy super hit, you completely dodge that entire bit of damage while you're in your teleport. For the PvE side of things, it's going to be the DPS benefits you get from extra arc damage, which if you're using something like Cloud Strike or Anarchy, you're going to be getting a decent amount of extra damage. However, it is technically nowhere near Celestial Nighthawk's benefit of damage, but it's still a good option if you want to use arc weapons. Coming up at number 2 in this top 10 countdown, we have the Stompies. Yet again, another exotic that has been dominating since the game came out and in my opinion, the number 1 PvP exotic for Destiny 2 hunters. Now obviously this is more of an aggressive option, Wormhusk Crown is still the better defensive option. If you've never heard of this exotic before, it increases sprint speed and slide distance, which are both very important for PvP, slide shotgunning, just moving around the battlefield a lot better, and it also improves all of your jumps, making the jumps a lot higher and a lot more violent, allowing you to stay a lot more vertical a lot quicker. Especially in close range, the ability to basically jump straight up in the air, forcing your enemy to reacquire the target that's moving very quickly, even after dealing with you above their heads to reacquire your teammates down below. Whereas if you're at head level, reacquiring your teammates is a lot easier. If they can't see your teammates, reacquiring them is going to take a lot longer. So when Shaq says hunters blaze a path for the rest of us, he is referring to this action. Hunters flank from the sides, from the backs, from above, forcing your enemies to look in a bunch of different directions away from your team, and forcing them to reacquire your team on the ground takes a lot longer. On top of the fact that usually if you have a good mid-air accuracy weapon like shotguns, hand cannons, sidearms, you can usually get the kill on people because situational awareness is difficult, especially on console. And in PvE, this is usually used for getting through strikes faster or getting through jump puzzles that need higher jumps, and is very useful and is often used in PvE PvE as well. And finally, at number 1 in this top 10 countdown, we have the Celestial Nighthawk, the only exotics for hunters, and I believe the only exotics currently that has a 9.5 out of 10 for anything, and in this one is PvE. Now, if you've never heard of this before, it modifies the golden gun to fire a single high damage shot. Technically, it does 6 times the damage of a regular golden gun shot, and enemies eliminated by the shot explode and grant super energy, and depending on the value of this target, you get more super energy back. Now, the biggest reason why this exotic is so very strong is gonna be the DPS. Firstly, you're firing 1 shot, which is a lot quicker than 3 shots, and secondly, it does a lot of freaking damage. If you take a look at my old PvE heavy spreadsheet, you can see the DPS is much above the ridiculous DPS that Swords had back last season, and the total damage is 200,000 in a single shot. No other weapon comes even close to this kind of damage, and this kind of output from activation to use to end of the super allows you to do a lot more damage than anything else in the game. So whenever you need to do DPS against a target at a safe range, Celestial Nighthawk is gonna be your best bet. And if you don't believe me, take a look at my special spreadsheet that I actually did for this season. The Cloud Strike with 100% crit rating is around 22,000 damage. If you just add 10% to that from Bakris, it is still nowhere near that of the Celestial Nighthawk's 55,000 DPS, and again, nowhere near Swords as well, which obviously are not ranged weapons. The next closest is going to be Interference 6. I have not yet done my heavies for this season, but this is what it looked like last season. And that is going to be the end of the video. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions or concerns about these exotics, something I may have missed, and also let me know what your favorite exotics are, and please let me know why, especially if it's not in the top 10. I need to understand why these exotics are good so I can add it for the next season. And please don't be one of those guys that say, oh, this guy's an idiot because he didn't even consider this exotic as the best in the game, because obviously I do a lot of research to make these spreadsheets as, you know, polished as they are, and then I have to go to the comments and dunk on you in the comments in front of the whole internet, and your girlfriend's gonna leave you. It's gonna be a whole thing, okay? So just tell me why and be nice about it. We'll be all cool. And of course, huge thank you to my patrons on Patreon. A lot of this stuff would not be possible without their support. Specifically, huge thank you to Medibudu, Mom and Dad, Shadow Moon, Joe Smith, Monday, Now to Halpin, Steve Bachmanwicz, Justin Ray, Raymond Showman, and Unipanther for the support on Patreon. Hell yeah! I love when I do it all in one go. But yeah, that's the end of it. Hope you guys did enjoy. My name is Unranked, and I'll see you guys on the next one.